here's the story. I know that all of you on this call and all members of the Michiana division are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed youngsters and will remain so for the indefinite future. But just to pretend, just to imagine, just to try and conceive that someday you could be feeling a little older and a little slower. And there could be consequences from that. You might find that you either want to or have to move away from the cozy little bungalow that you live in now to something a bit more compact. You might start to get a little frightened of stairways, feel a little insecure on stairs, so that the layout in the basement might not be such a good idea anymore. Maybe even you have your layout in the garage, but you're still can't handle anymore having a large and ambitious layout. It's just too much to take care of as you have infirmities or just the normal aging. You might find that your operating group is more interested in breakfast than they are in running trains. So what we're going to look at today is a couple of railroads where even in a small room and even with a very narrow layout with just a few turnouts being involved and relatively little rolling stock, you could have a prototype based layout and that would keep you busy. So we're going to be looking at two of such railroads, both of them in Illinois, and both of them by coincidence had their connection to the outside world with the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy. They're both rural, kind of out and back kind of short lines. One of them had just one locomotive. Trains were short. And in general, this would be a different way of thinking about your layout, but circumstances or your own wishes could suggest that this would be what you want to do. The first one is the Galesburg and Great Eastern. Here's a map of west central Illinois. There's Galesburg, and you see it's a sort of a purplish line coming towards Galesburg. That's the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, Maine. I don't know if you can see my cursor.
Yep.
Moving. It goes through Watauga. You might remember several months ago, I shared some images from Watauga that included corrugated buildings where the corrugations were of different widths, and we kind of got off on that topic for a few days as we were sharing various images. And the Galesburg and Great Eastern had its connection in Watauga. It was its origin was with a different railroad name, the Galesburg, Etherly, and Eastern, which had its origins in 1898. The Galesburg, Etherly, and Eastern built east from Watauga to Etherly, which would have been basically down here. Okay, here we are in Watauga. Etherly was purely a company town. There, in some ways, there really was no Etherly. But there are a couple of coal mines there. This was almost exclusively coal paid the money, although it also handled agricultural products. So these are more shots from Watauga as it looks today. Because the Galesburg, Etherly, and Eastern was concerned about being captive to the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, because that was felt they were always being charged punitive rates. they threatened to, but never did, build south to a Santa Fe connection in Dahinda, Illinois, on the Spoon River. Here's Dahinda. But they never built that, actually, and eventually the Galesburg, Etherly, and Eastern built a line 3 miles north to Victoria, Illinois, where there was also coal deposits. The financial panic of 1893 and the gradual playing out of their coal seams in Etherly weakened the railroad, and it went bankrupt. So in 1898, the Galesburg and Great Eastern was formed and eventually acquired the Galesburg, Etherly, and Eastern track east from Watauga, but they redirected it just to go basically directly to Victoria, and then branched a few miles south to a closer coal deposit, which became the Little John Mine. The Etherly branch was finally closed in 1912, and the track was removed just before World War I. But even as early as 1899, many Etherly buildings were picked up and moved closer to Victoria. And now almost nothing is left of Etherly, but this vague gap in the trees and a family cemetery, which is marked Etherly, and this is the only thing about Etherly that exists. The Galesburg and Great Eastern always struggled trying to make a go at it, just hauling coal and grain. At Victoria, it graded but never built east to a Rock Island connection, because they shared the same concern about being captive to the Burlington, but they ran out of money, and they never went any further than just grading the line. During the Great Depression, the bank that held all of the Galesburg and Great Eastern's cash went under. So suddenly they had no cash at all, not just very little cash, zero. Wow. Then there was an accident involving one of their few money-making parts of the railroad. Oh, here's another Galesburg and Great Eastern 280. This little automobile that was fitted with railroad wheels, and that was their passenger and mail service, but it got in an accident. So they had nothing that was making any money. For a while, they had no locomotives at all and ran no trains. I'm going to back up so you can get another look at those 280s. At least one of them was supposed to be a former Rock Island.
Right.
And that picture looks bigger on my screen on my other laptop, and it looks like a postage stamp here.
Well, if you you've got in the upper right where it says 100%, just hit that little plus sign.
Yeah, I'll expand it a little, but it'll be a little.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Whoops, that was not well advised.
I don't think your image is large on our screen.
No, it's not.
You got to hit that square up in the upper right hand corner.
Yeah, you're at 611% there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just pixelated now.
Yeah. So that gets you another feel. As you can see, those are 2-bay hoppers.
Mm-hmm.
Common for that period and in that area. Yeah.
So let's see. So I don't seem, there we go. So the site of the Little John mine, in common with a lot of mines in that part of Illinois, is now flooded with water, and it's become a privately owned fishing preserve for wealthy Chicagoans. So in the Depression, they had no locomotives and ran no trains, and then the Depression began to lessen, and the coal mine changed hands. And eventually it was the coal mining company that acquired the railroad. So from the 1940s to 1960, there's a coal mine car that still exists in the weeds. From the 1940s to the 1960s, they hauled mainly coal. They ran 2 round trips per day with a typical train consisting of a steam locomotive, usually that 280, and maybe a dozen hopper cars and a caboose.
Hey,
And then when
Dave,
they'd arrive, yes,
that's not a coal, that's a manure spreader.
okay. I was hoping, but that does look like a railroad wheel.
That's
there.
what I thought it looked like too, a manure spreader, I have to admit.
Okay,
That's
But I
the
think-
rim. That's a steel rim off of some rubber tired something leaning
okay.
up against it, just the
Then
rim.
I will remove that image from the presentation.
Oh,
But,
leave it. Spread some manure.
It just tells us,
Yeah.
tells us what you're full of.
Yes,
Is their third
so
cash
the,
producer.
the coal hoppers that would arrive in Watauga usually went to Chicago. So it was basically eastbound trains out of Galesburg through Watauga, picking up those coal hoppers. So the mine played out in 1960, and the Stone Fort Corporation, which was the last operator, even though they may have had a little bit of agricultural business, said no coal, no railroad. The mining machinery, as well as by that time, they weren't steam anymore. They had 2 small Whitcombs. They were moved to a coal mine to the northeast in Wyoming, Illinois. The rails were pulled up and scrapped, and the right of way ended up generally back in the hands of the farmers who had originally deeded the land. But as you drive around the area, you can still see small rises in the farm fields and cleared areas, gaps in the trees, and little bumps in the country roads that still mark where the right of way went from Watauga to Victoria. In 2008, I was taking some railfan pictures in Watauga with a friend, and he and I were speculating about the origins of this decrepit-looking spur that came off the BNSF main and went east. It clearly hadn't been used for a long period of time. And that just kind of ended in the trees there. Well, we were interrupted by a BNSF signal maintainer who asked just what we thought we were doing wandering around on railroad property. And we told him that we were trying to find any remains that we could find of the Galesburg and Great Eastern. And his mood changed immediately. And he told us that the tracks we were standing on were relayed in 1937 as part of the Galesburg and Great Eastern interchange with the CB&Q, that we were standing on what had been old Illinois Route 34, which has also been moved. And he told us that there was a wood depot in Victoria that we could see. We already knew that. And there's our friend. This is the line that would have gone to Victoria. And he then told us there was more to see. He said, if you knew where to look, and he warned that he himself found it about every other time that he went looking for it, you could find the old water tank and the engine house of the Galesburg and Great Easterns, where it still stood near the site of the Little John mine. So we drove to the depot in Victoria, which still stands and isn't in very bad shape, where I'm standing on the eastern face of, looking at the eastern face of the depot, and there was a handcar shed, basically near where I am. Oh, actually, this is the eastern face, and this is where the handcar shed was. And it needs a little roof repair. But this is the only remaining depot, and it probably was the only depot on the Galesburg and Great Eastern, standing on the glorious corner of Union and Depot Street. There's nothing else around there except some homes. I got an interior shot through the window. And we're looking west now, and you can see a grain elevator. That grain elevator was rail served. And so we, after exploring the grain elevator, we drove a little bit further east back towards the CB&Q and went down a country road and found nothing. And we couldn't find another country road that was meeting the description of our new friend, the signal maintainer. So we took it again and I looked up and this is basically what I saw. And I said, I think we've found it. So the water tank is still standing on its brick support. It no longer has a spout. You can see that it's also standing on wood timbers, and probably those timbers will control when that water tank finally collapses to the ground. And then we turned around and there was the engine house. 2 stalls. In addition to their 280, they also had an 060. And a person who heard this presentation a few weeks ago at our NMRA divisional meet showed me a picture that he found of the 2 locomotives actually in the stalls. And they've built a lean-to one side, but and they've newly faced one side of the building. This is the Galesburg and Great Eastern engine house. So an engine house, a water tank, some way of getting coal into the engine, but I don't think they had an actual coal tipple. This building would seem to be of the right age to be railroad related, but it might also be owned by a local farmer, the same one who owns that decrepit manure spreader, maybe. We did find one cross tie left in a dirt road. And you can see that the ties that were creosoted, the creosote is still doing its job all these years later of inhibiting vegetation, because you can see that pattern. And we're looking south towards Etherly, but it actually it would have just gone south to a yard that they had in the vicinity of the engine facilities through this right of way. I think this is probably agricultural in origin. There's another shot of the Little John Conservation Club. So this is where the coal mine would have been. And at one point, the coal was trucked to the railroad and then loaded on the rail cars rather than the rail cars getting right to the coal mine. But I think in 1898 or whatever, it would have been all rail. There's the water. So we're taking another look at the map. This is a railroad that would have had very few turnouts. They did not turn the locomotives. So presumably, and the pictures that I saw showed the locomotive, the front of the locomotive visible in the engine house. So it would have, the locomotive would have been facing south and then presumably would have backed up. And then in Victoria would have taken another turnout to face forward going to Watauga and then back up from Watauga to Victoria. So if the idea of having just 2 steam locomotives, short trains, a caboose, very narrow right-of-way appeals, you may want to consider the Galesburg and Great Eastern. This is a 1930s shot showing that they shipped in both 2-bay hoppers and also gondolas, as was common at the time for shipping coal. I don't see this is, I did not crop, I cropped a locomotive out of this picture, but there was no evidence of agricultural traffic on this particular train. Primarily it was coal. This is the original picture. So that's the Galesburg and Great Eastern. The CB&Q would be your visible staging yard where loads and empties are handed. You have single track going through farm fields. You have that little wooden depot, a grain elevator, maybe there were more, a spur south to the mine where there was a little yard, an engine facility, 2 locomotives, 34 or 36 foot long hoppers, and the let's see if there's any other information here. And again, that your op session would be the prototypical 2 trains out and back every day. So that should be leaving plenty of room for your operators to go eat lunch or breakfast. And you wouldn't really have to model the mine because again, they use trucks to get the coal from the mine. So you could have a backdrop photo or a painting or just a line of trees and say that's where it is. If you're an ambitious period modeler, you could even speculate and try and model the 1890s Etherly Railroad, but I have no pictures or other information of that to share with you, so you'd be on your own for that. So that's the Galesburg and Great Eastern. The second railroad, also in Illinois, is even more stripped down and basic. This is the Hoople in Tampico. Tampico may ring a bell with you because that is the birthplace of President Reagan and on a now abandoned CB&Q line. I can't really say it's a hopping tourist destination, but clearly if there's tourism at all in Tampico, it's because of the Reagan birthplace, which is preserved by the government and open for tours and such. Reagan once said, talking about his family, which didn't have much money, that they weren't born on the wrong side of the railroad tracks, but he sure could hear the whistle blow. So he was possibly hearing both railroads. Actually, he wouldn't have been because the Hoople, Yorktown, and Tampico was the creature of a 1908 stock promoter's idea of an electric railroad running from Hoople, which is really in the middle of nowhere, up to Tampico on a kind of roundabout route. It would be 14 miles through other small rural towns like Yorktown, Allenville, which I was unable to find, Love Station, which I was unable to find, and Graham Crossing, which I think was actually literally just a crossing and not a place. So there isn't much except for Yorktown between Hoople and Yorktown and Tampico. Well, they never did build the electric railroad. They built it to electric railroad standards, meaning very light rail and not terribly great ballasted right-of-way, but they never put up wire, and they always had a small steam locomotive, usually acquired from the CB&Q, and almost always an 080. Whoops. Now, I don't know why it does that, but there's, once again, we'll try and expand this a little for you, because if you're going to do the Hoople, Yorktown, and Tampico, that's your locomotive. As you can see, it's got a very low boiler and a wooden caboose that looks somewhat combustible. And the closest actually HO model that I'm aware of would have been the old model die casting 080 that was a Southern Pacific prototype, but it had that same low boiler. I think it would have needed a taller stack. Apparently, this 080, no matter how careful the fireman was, it was always spewing forth a lot of coal smoke. The whole engine was in rather rough shape. In fact, they actually made the railroad reroute the tracks because it used to go through some of the nicest neighborhoods in Tampico to get to the CB&Q, and they people said this, they just didn't want this running down their street, so they had to do a little bit of track laying in Tampico to please the city fathers. But this was a railroad built to serve farmers. The original hope was it would connect with the CB&Q in Tampico and a Rock Island connection to the south. But they never built the Rock Island connection, and it's just as well that they didn't, because the Rock Island wouldn't even allow its cars to go to the Hoople, Yorktown, and Tampico for fear that it would never see them again. And even the farmers who were along the route were kind of two minds about this railroad, even though it existed to serve them. So as they would ask a farmer for permission to build the railroad on his property, if the farmer said no, then they would hope that the farmer across the street would say yes. So the line would weave back and forth down the country road, giving it the pumpkin vine name. And it was, again, built to these light interurban standards. And the operations were extremely informal. Let's see if we can reduce that to its other size and move forward. Apparently I have to get it down to the original size before I can move. So here's another map. This doesn't show any of the turnouts, and there was a couple of turnouts en route. There was interchange track in Tampico, and there was a engine service facility and a runaround track in Hoople. Maybe I will enlarge this too. As you can see, it tended to follow country roads for a while and then just went out into the countryside. And I have to reduce that before I can move on. So here's another shot of their locomotive on the last day of operation. Apparently, when this engine needed service, it would be sent down to Galesburg. August of 1953 was the last day of operation. So if you're thinking of an operating session it had one locomotive, one caboose. At one time, it had one wooden combine passenger car, but that ended up deteriorating. The train would leave Hoople exactly on time, somewhere between 8:30 and 10. And it would low as soon as all the people who wanted to ride were on board, and as soon as all the freight had been put in the cars by the farmers, then it would leave. It returned, again, strictly according to timetable, somewhere between 3:30 and 7 o'clock p.m., depending on how much stuff there was to pick up, to haul back, and how many passengers were late catching the train. I'm reading from an official history there. Freight included harvested crops, ice, sand, gravel, lumber, road building material, quote, and anything else folks needed that the train could carry, end quote. There were large corn storage cribs spouted along the track to load newly harvested grain, but there were no sidings. They would just drop off a car and hope to pick it up on the way back. Livestock pens, cattle, horses, sheep, and swine were hauled, but again, no sidings. So they would just hope to, maybe they would just sit there while the unloading took place or the loading. Passengers, in spite of the almost non-existent timetable, would pay 50 cents fare to get from Hoople to Tampico, and 25 cents if they got off on any spot closer in. The railroad ran 6 days a week. It knocked off on Sunday because the engineer told them he was going to be in church and couldn't work on the railroad on Sundays. So he went to church in Tampico, and the railroad wouldn't run because the engineer was in church. It was a custom for passengers to tip one of the engineers money on getting off the train. And these were called dice tips because when the train wasn't running, the engineer would shoot dice waiting for the next scheduled departure. I mentioned the old wooden combine. It had to be retired. It just rotted away, and then passengers would ride in the caboose. And once they were riding in the caboose, as a rule, they were not asked to pay. They could pay if they wanted. Now I'm going to have to reduce this again in order to move on. I'm not sure why that is, but it is. So here's a grain elevator in Hoople. The caption to this photo says the tracks of the H, Y, and T, you can see them there, are go past this grain elevator. So this would have been one of their major customers. Here's their only home-owned piece of rolling stock, flat car, which doesn't look in the best possible condition here. But apparently the picture was taken in 1938. Assuming they did any track maintenance at all, I guess it would have involved this car. So there's your rolling stock, except for offline stuff. I think I have shared this picture before with the group. The picture was taken to focus on the smoky locomotive, but notice that the tank car, because there was a siding in Hoople, is loading what looks like a truck which probably puts down oil on country roads.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's the spreading tar on the gravel roads.
Yeah,
Right.
well,
Yep.
and they still do that on some of those country roads in Illinois, especially near someone's house, to avoid that cloud of dust anytime anyone drives by. I always feel kind of guilty chasing trains on some of those country roads because it really does create a kind of a cyclone of white gravel dust.
Usually it's the wife who convinces the farmer to pay the company to spread the oil so that she doesn't get dirty laundry.
Well, and happy, and as the saying goes, happy wife, happy life.
Yes.
So yeah, and everyone is happier when your sheets don't have
Coal
dust
dust.
in them.
Yeah.
I think this is a really
Oh.
neat picture. And again, it shows that they did have a siding there in Hoople. And I think this was towards the end. A neat shot of, let's see if we can get a little closer to those freight cars in the back there. Yeah, those are classics. It looks like a wood car here,
Mhm.
but it would have been offline. They only had the flat car.
That front one is a Pullman standard end, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I see darts, and I don't know if they are the original Youngstown, not Youngstown, Dreadnought darts, or whether they're the darts that go the full width of the car. And doesn't it look like it's a USRA rebuild with that?
Yeah, it looked like a rebuild. Yeah.
Let's get a little closer here again. Yeah, I think that's a USRA rebuild with that inset
Right.
still.
So
Mhm.
This is the best picture I've ever found. And of course, it has no locomotive on it, but it gives you a feel for what you would be modeling with your right of way, because obviously the railroad's in full operation, and obviously the weed sprayer has not paid a visit.
Dave, can you zoom in on that Pensy boxcar again?
Sure. What I can't do is move the image.
Yes, you can.
Oh, I
See that
can't.
little hand?
Yeah.
Just click down and hold it and you can slide it over.
Yeah, look at that. Almost get the number.
Oh,
No, I'm looking at the number. It's an X20 something and it looks like it's an X20.
Could be a 23 or 25.
I'm thinking that, yeah, you too, huh?
Mhm.
would it
That
have
would be the
saved this?
rebuilds.
Would it have saved this? Would have kept the same class number when they rebuilt?
Good question.
The X23s were definitely wood with that unusual steel bracing.
It also looks like it could be one of the 29s.
With the sill? Oh,
With the sill above that. See that sill you've got your cursor on?
yeah,
Right above it, you've got a 6-inch, there it is.
yeah.
You got
I thought the sill on the X29s was, I mean, it was a panel because of rusting. I thought that was wider
right.
than this as a rule.
some of them were a little narrower.
Okay.
It's a
Yeah.
Pennsy boxcar. What matters?
It also had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels there.
Yeah. 7-rung ladder.
It looks like it has maybe just a 4-digit number.
Yeah,
It's
I
like-
just get goosebumps when the detective agency here works like this.
And I don't know of anything else we can see here, but the wheels are shiny, so this is an active
Yeah.
car.
Go back to the double sheath car and look at the truck that's sitting in front of it, be just behind that green auger. The
Oh, yeah.
photo is dating from probably the early 40s, late 40s, 50. Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't need to zoom in so much, but it's just a classic scene of an older, farm truck.
yeah.
next
Two,
to a-
there's 2 trucks.
Yes, there are.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah.
so those box cars might contain something they're unloading.
Yeah, you can see a guy standing in one of them.
Yeah, yeah.
And they seem to be at an elevator.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic corrugated iron covered wood grain elevator,
Then here's one of those
grain augers.
grain augers. Is there
Yep.
anything off to this side we should be looking at?
No,
Mine. A quarry.
Yeah, it could be. Some more, some more
Yeah.
vehicles. Country
Yep.
roads. Looks like a
Another, farm truck
trailer
or
of some
vehicle.
kind.
and It is a fantastic photo. Yeah.
That really is. That does look like a quarry, that too.
So
But you-
Doug, you know so much. What brand of hat is this kid wearing?
Well, I can't see the seed corn company name, so I'm not sure.
Definitely a corn company, you know that?
He's got quite a widow's peak going. I think that might be Eddie Munster.
Good observation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, the person who took the photo was disgusted because he didn't get the subject in the photo so well. I mean, we're the ones who like it, but they were probably thinking, oh, you can hardly see the kid.
yeah, this is the subject clearly.
Right.
Yep. Yeah,
And of
but-
course, he's walking on the rail.
Well, I think the rail is so buried, I think he's standing on the dirt next to the rail and he's got one toe.
oh, his shoes are on the rail.
Yeah,
His
they are,
shoes
but he's also got his heels on the dirt.
Right.
Okay,
There's a little bridge over the ditch there on the left.
There is. Look at that.
oh, yeah.
Might be a green door. Could be a
It
green
probably
door.
is. There's a stack of them by the pole.
Oh, yeah.
Might-
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
that-
right.
right
Yeah,
there.
no kidding. All kinds of stuff in his photo.
You know, the more I look at this picture, I think I know why it's taken. Those pants look brand new.
That's
Yeah,
right.
they do. Yeah, they do.
Outfit.
They haven't gone through the wash machine yet. They're right from the store.
Well, it's probably August and he's getting ready to go back to school.
Yeah,
Oh, sure. Yep.
probably
Yeah.
a Sunday.
So
Mhm.
Hoople was the end of the line. And the town was so sure that having this railroad was its ticket to prosperity that they actually changed the entire orientation of the town so that the Hoople Depot was in the center of town. This is what I believe to be a little elevation from the right of way coming into Hoople. And here it is, the Hoople Depot, which is preserved. Looking a little smaller than some garden sheds. Here's the back. I suspect that diagonal piece of wood is pretty important to keeping the building standing.
Yeah,
As I understand the track plan, the track went behind the depot, further, I guess it would be west, like towards where that truck is. There was an engine house, there was a water tank, and there may have been a coal tipple, and there was a runaround track. Here's the western face of the depot. And by holding my camera to the window, I was able to get some interior shots. It functions as Hoople's own little museum,
Hmm.
which you can see an early photo of the depot there on the wall. There's not much in Hoople other than this. But they are very concerned about making this the most pleasant experience for their visitors that they possibly can, because they've put an air wick
Yeah.
on the desk. So there's a more distorted view of that picture of the depot and some newspaper clippings. This is the local firehouse, which is very new, but it has information about the railroad. 1909 to 1953. So it was steam from beginning to end. And then they brag about the depot. And this woman told me, saw me taking these pictures and came out of a building and said, oh, you've got to go see the depot. And it's just too bad that you're not here during our annual festivities, when that's the one day of the year they open the door and let people inside. And this painting, which actually is the same as a picture we saw earlier. There are a few interesting things about the firehouse, however. This interesting, what is this called? Foamite Child's Company in Utica, New York, and a very interesting old fire plug. I also found this abandoned gas station right along the right of way on the outskirts of town, if there is an outskirts. So there's the Hoople, Yorktown, and Tampico. Almost nothing is left except what you've seen here. So as with the Galesburg and Great Eastern, the interchange at Tampico would be your staging yard. You wouldn't really have to model a CB&Q. The single track meanders through small town. There were a couple of sidings, but not many. They had more customers than they had sidings. You end up with Hoople with its grain elevator, a depot, an engine service facility, including a one-stall engine house. And all that was about 100 yards west of the depot, plus a runaround track.
And they also had a stock, they also had a stockyard, because I have a photo of it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, and
Well,
I have a photo of the stockyard at Tampico.
Oh,
Did-
cool.
Did the stockyards have sidings?
I'm assuming they did. Yes, the Hoople one did, and it's
Okay.
next to coal bunkers.
Right, yeah, there were side, you can see on this map, there's, let's expand that. That's how they changed the orientation of the town so that the depot was at the top.
Oh,
Uh,
Hoople shows. Yeah.
Yeah,
There
that would
was
be for,
a
that
coal
would be
tipple.
for coal mine for loading of cars. But the photo I have of the stock pens shows just some standard coal bins that would be alongside a track in the
Mhm.
background.
There
So-
was a siding at Yorktown.
Ah,
Mhm.
Here's where they had to,
across the
here's
road.
where they were inconvenienced by
Crossing the road.
farmers who wouldn't let them build on their land. There might have been something at Fairfield, but it doesn't appear from this map that there was a siding. But again, what I read was the operations were so leisurely that they just drop a car off and hope that it was loaded or unloaded by the time they came back. But there definitely was a siding in Yorktown.
Wonder if they even had a runaround.
It doesn't say it here, but the information I read said they had a runaround track.
Mhm.
Well, you know, I'm looking on Google Earth right now, a satellite view of the town, and the roads out there, they all follow the curvature of the railroad, which is, of course, no longer there.
Mhm.
It's rather fascinating. Now, what I'm trying to find is the depot.
Well,
Is
it would
Is
it
it on
would-
78?
It would be, it's not right on the road, but if you find Hoople, the main street of Hoople, which is a north-south street,
Okay,
the street ends north at the depot.
Ah,
okay.
And again, it would just look like a garage
Yeah.
from above.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, I've got it. Yeah. Right there, just east of the grain bins and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
because you
oh,
could see
I'm-
that, you could see that, truck in the background in the earlier there.
okay, I
Mhm.
got it.
Yep.
Some
It's just a
trees
small
around it.
building.
Okay, neat.
Yeah. Now, Dave, I also have a photo of a CB&Q depot marked Yorktown. I don't know if it's the one in Illinois that you're dealing with or if it's another Yorktown somewhere.
Oh,
I don't have it clearly marked as its location. It just says Yorktown on the end of the building.
I'll be darned.
So when you
Um,
get done, I'll share the photos I've got so you can. see
Yes.
what
Yeah, I'd
Um,
like to see that.
So the CB&Q is up here,
Right.
and that's a line that's long since removed. I think this is the line that came out of Mendota.
Yeah, to Den Rock.
Yep.
yeah.
Yes,
And Prophetstown is the next town toward the west there. Should be Prophetstown.
yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So Lemoyne would, or is it Lemoyle, that has the Preserve Depot and Caboose? I think that's on this line, because I think Ron has shown us a grain elevator there, a
Oh,
picture of a grain
yeah.
elevator there.
It definitely looks like a ex-CB&Q weight car in those photos. A side door weight car. Well,
And so I'm getting close to the end. You'd want the smallest 060 you could find. You'd want a wood caboose. And the wood combine, which I have seen a picture of, looked a little bit like what Mantua or Tyco had to go with their Petticoat Junction train set. Really short.
I think you could see the roof of it in that flat car photo behind the flat car. If you go way back there. Yeah. See the right-hand stake sticking up, that dark thing there, that looks like the roof of a
Sure enough.
old coach or combine there.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Duckbill roof. Yep.
Yeah. That must have been it.
And
And eventually-
that is the stock pens there to the right side.
Yeah,
right next to the
yeah,
flat car.
right.
Oh, sure enough.
Right.
So there was a siding, and it's in the so-called yards at Hoople.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, there's your stock pen.
I'll be down.
The
And an oil jobber off in the distance there behind the coach.
Mhm.
well, and yeah, and that gas station that I showed earlier would be well away from this, because this was supposedly the yards were 100. I think they said 100 yards away from the depot, but on the opposite direction. But yeah,
Mhm.
there is a bulk oil dealer of some kind there,
Yeah.
as you would expect when this is the only transportation for farmers 14
Yeah.
miles away from the CB&Q.
And typically small town rural America where you have stock pens, grain elevator, oil jobber all along the same
Yeah,
track.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I was,
Mhm.
I think you would want about the smallest rail you could possibly handle to do this
40.
layout justice. I
The
wouldn't worry
Atlas
too much.
Code 100 is too thick.
I think it would be, not if you're modeling in G scale.
Yeah.
And you think of the money you could save. You don't have to have any ballast, just weeds. Now, you really couldn't model that incredible black smoke out of the locomotive, but you could have farmhouses with very dirty laundry on the line.
Yeah.
And there is information on the internet. And I can also tell you, and Doug, you may have seen this, there's a very nicely done video, which I assume has been converted to DVD, and portions of it can be found on YouTube. So if you go to
Oh.
YouTube, you'll actually see pictures of the steam locomotive moving
Oh,
and people recounting their own experiences with the Hoople, Yorktown, and Tampico. But the real, but there aren't that many photos, even on that video, of railroad facilities or online customers. It's mostly just pictures of the train moving. So you would have at least some freedom to model the typical, and no one is going to be screaming at you for being unrealistic. If you're really an ambitious modeler, you could lay the overhead wire and run it as the interurban that they actually intended back in 1908. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen because I'm done.
Oh, very good, David. Thank you so much. That was great.
Yes, very enjoyable, but
Yeah.
let me see if I can share a screen here.
That was
Show you.
enjoyable.
Oh, cool.
Ah,
That is the
Oh.
stockyard at Hoople.
Huh.
and coal bunkers can be seen in the background.
Yeah. And you see, it's the same photograph with the same cell phone tape around it in somebody's scrapbook that you have of the flat car.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
So it's
Reunited.
from, yeah. Now
And
here is, let's see, you see
Oh,
that's,
wow.
Oh, now this is Tampico. Yeah.
yeah, that's Tampico.
Now that could, however, be on the CB&Q
It could be. It
because
doesn't
they had
specify.
they had a surprisingly substantial depot in Tampico.
Yeah. And then this is the depot photo I have of Yorktown. And, I don't know of any reason why Yorktown would, unless it's another CB&Q Yorktown, I'm just not, I can't quote every depot on the CB&Q to tell you for sure.
The fact that it has a bay window suggesting an operator, and the fact that it's about 8 times bigger than the Hoople depot
Yeah.
suggests, and there
Yeah.
seems to be actually,
Looks like a large grain elevator or feed mill in the background.
yeah,
and-
yeah.
Uniforms. Yeah,
I don't think that's the Yorktown that's on the Hoople, Yorktown, and Tampico, but it's a
No, I
neat
just-
building, and it's definitely classic CB&Q with the board and batten siding.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I just searched some photos as you were talking and see what I had because I knew the Hoople name rang a bell. So,
Yeah. Pretty neat.
yeah. So
Good stuff.
anyway, some fun stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you very much, guys.
thank you for improving the information, Doug. That's really great.
Okay.
Good stuff. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Dave, for the great presentation. Thanks, Doug, for contributing, and thanks, everybody, for attending.
So
Next
now I'm
go
going to
ahead.
put in a plug. When
Yeah.
we gave this presentation to the local division a few weeks ago, it was the theme of the clinics that day was fresh starts. So mine was the fresh start of having to downsize. Another guy named Dave Poquette gave a fresh start because at age 60, he was let go from his job and had to move to a cheaper house, and he lost his layout, which was the only double deck layout that used the mushroom format in all of Milwaukee. So now he has just a spare bedroom because his new house doesn't have the space. And the third presentation was by Ken Thompson, who has decided to backdate his Galesburg to Peoria line back to the CB&Q era. And Ken will be giving that presentation to our group in May.
That's right.
So a little advertisement.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
And yeah, so next week we have John Golden scheduled to do the presentation on his switching layout that he had scheduled a couple months ago and had to postpone. So we'll look forward to that. And like I say, appreciate everybody showing up. Have a great Thursday, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, guys.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Bye.